Hello there, it's Susie Walker here from Psychologies magazine on our 1 o'clock broadcast, and today I'm joined by Lucie Andersen-Wood, psychotherapist, storyteller and founder of the World Storytelling Cafe. And today we want to talk really about how stories can help us heal, stories can help us find a new way forward for ourselves and for the world, I think. But Lucie, welcome first of all. Hello.
Thank you. Hi.
Tell us about why storytelling is so important right now.
Well, I think right now, because we have the pandemic, COVID-19, people are kind of feeling quite afraid and not quite sure about this new world that we're living in. So from the point of view of pure distraction, stories can be quite helpful in trying to reduce stress. But from a more serious point of view, I think starting to view stories as kind of part of the fabric of our lives. I mean, if you view our lives as a piece of cloth, then you could view stories as embroidery on the cloth. And I think if we start to realize how important stories are for our lives, and how we, more importantly than that, how we think about our lives, how we talk to ourselves about our lives, how we talk to others, our family members, our friends, how we think every minute and every day about our lives. The kind of story that we tell ourselves about what's happening in our lives can make the difference between feeling like a victim or feeling like we're okay and we're actually a survivor, or we're actually pretty strong. So I think stories are really, really essential. It's a way of framing what's happening in the world. And I think right now we need to have very powerful frames about what's happening in our lives and what's happening in our communities and the world at large. And if we have a victim mentality, or if we have a very negative story about what's going on, then I think, it causes a lot of pain and suffering unnecessarily. And it makes us lose sight of what a wonderful world we actually live in, and how there are so many things to be grateful for in this world. So I think from that point of view, having stories is really, really important.
I've been talking to one of my team this morning, and we were talking about the COVID-19, and we're talking about how kind of the uncertainty, and we both got a bit teary because of everything else that's happening in the world, and what could we do, and how can we help, and how can we be a positive influence in the world. But we were both aware of the stories that we were telling ourselves that were negative and that were not useful, and beating ourselves up and going down this terrible negative spiral of beating ourselves up. So how do we start with creating a new story for ourselves? I know that you've got this brilliant World Storytelling Cafe, which all the links are below. Yeah. And you've got these great new kind of recordings, haven't you? Like ways of going on a kind of quest, which I love. I mean, how do we start? Where do we start with creating a new story for ourselves?
Yeah. So usually the best place to start is with awareness. So if you're aware of what you're doing, if you're aware that you're falling into a victim pattern, and you notice that you're blaming everybody around you for life's difficulties, then that's a really important first step. And a lot of people never actually get to that step. They carry on throughout their whole lives blaming other people for their particular situation. So awareness and understanding is the next step, is really, really important. So understanding where these feelings or these attitudes have come from. So some of our attitudes could be extremely legitimate. So if you've been abused or bullied as a child, then these feelings of victimhood have got a a serious reason, a cause underneath them. But the important thing is to realize, well, that's what's happened in the past, and it probably wasn't your fault as a child that these things happened to you. It's the child.
But it absolutely wasn't your fault. I mean,
sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't your. It absolutely wasn't your fault. You know.
Yes. Yeah. But then, as you're growing up, if you start to, or if you continue to think of yourself as a victim of circumstance or a victim of real things that have happened to you, rather than reframing your situation as a survivor, that whatever happened to you was very wrong, and hopefully, maybe in school, if you've been bullied, it could have been sorted out, or if it was more serious, hopefully the legal system might have supported you. But very often people are left with stories decades later where they're still feeling like a victim, and they've kind of wasted those years. So in some situations, there is no way of bringing the bully to justice. And really what you're doing is, for those decades that you've been thinking about it and labeling yourself as the bullied or the victim, you've actually been torturing yourself much more than the original bully. So I think it's really important to then decide, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to spend the rest of my life feeling like a victim and feeling anger inside my body? Or am I going to take responsibility for how I'm feeling, and not necessarily forgiving the person or the people or the institution, but taking responsibility, and for yourself, forgiving the situation, so that you're not holding on to negative feelings of anger. And then one of the things that I find really helpful is to then start to explore the different parts of yourself. So particularly if it's something, and it very often is, something that's happened to you during your early years, if you can go back and through the subconscious mind, or through whatever methods you choose, to connect with the child part of you who's feeling these emotions that are very dysfunctional, very unhelpful for you. And one of the things that we do, or I do, in the My Story section of the World Storytelling Cafe is I present visualizations, which are basically journeys for people to go into their subconscious mind and to find their inner child, or to find different parts of themselves. And then they meet their inner child and talk with their inner child, and maybe play with their inner child, and heal the relationship between themselves and the inner child if that's necessary. And generally people find that very, very empowering to heal that hurt. And then it's not a matter of once you've done that, you're sorted, you're fixed. In my experience, it's something that is very healing, but with most of these things, it's a journey, and there are always new events, new opportunities for pain or suffering in this life. You know, there's always people dying or getting sick, or things happening, as well as joyful things. And so it's a constant practice of coming back to the central part of you. And I symbolize that as the heart, where the child, the inner child, that part of you resides. And I think in my experience, the best way to do that is through the subconscious mind and through visualizations, either gentle visualizations or deep hypnosis. There are many other ways that other therapists use.
Yeah, at Psychologies, what we do is we're a platform for many, many ways of healing. And what we try to do to our readers, as we're interviewing you, and we interview lots of different methodologies. Yeah. I mean, I know some of my friends say to me, I'd rather stick hot irons in my eyes than go to therapy. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, that's why we also have ways of swimming in the cold sea, or there's many, many ways to start the healing. As opposed to what we're committed to at Psychologies is very much this idea of how do we start on the healing journey. And what I heard you say earlier was this, first of all, the acknowledgement of whatever pain that makes someone maybe be suffering, and to acknowledge any abuse, or acknowledge, you know, not to kind of to minimize that, just to acknowledge it and say this happened.
Yeah.
But then, as you say, what can happen is that what we don't want to do is disempower ourselves. You know, what we want is to empower ourselves and go, okay, this happened and this was terrible. We're not going to carry that darkness around with us for the rest of our lives, and find a way through. And that's why, I mean, I know on my own journey that stories have created a brilliant new, I'm a very creative person, so storytelling, finding a new story to tell about my own journey, my own pain, we've all got it, whatever that is such a powerful way of doing that. Really, really great.
Yes. I mean, it's almost as if we're sort of structured, our brains are structured in a way to be receptive to the elements of a story. So Jung proposed that stories are basically in our DNA, in a bit like, I don't know if you know, Chomsky suggested that there's a language acquisition device that we're all born with, and that's how children all throughout all cultures learn how to speak, how to communicate. There's almost like a grammatical system that's pre-wired, and Carl Jung suggested that stories through the collective unconscious are basically pre-wired into our brains, and that's why every culture throughout history, throughout the world, uses stories as a way of communicating and passing on, empowering, and also not just empowering stories, but also stories to try and keep people in their place. You know, so the stories, we've always used them in this culture, sort of stories to prevent children from straying away from the home. So, you know, Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf, stories to stop children from being lazy. So the story of the Three Little Pigs, and the pig who was lazy and just chose the easy way of building his house out of straw. He was the one that got gobbled up. The diligent one, you know, had what society would view as good values. The diligent one survived. So it's really, it's a cultural kind of pervasive way of helping us to join our culture in a positive and meaningful way, I think.
I mean, I think what's happening in the world right now, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, what's happening right now is to look at the stories, you know, historical stories that we've been telling ourselves, and to question them and to challenge them. And then, you know, the journey forward is to create new stories to tell, authentic stories to tell in terms of a healing. But there is, you know, there is, as you said, from a therapeutic sense, it's acknowledging pain and acknowledging abuse at the beginning before we can go on to tell a story and look at the story that's been told, and say all these stories that have been there to perhaps manipulate us, or to, you know, that we've taken on as our own without ever questioning them. So I feel, you know, whether it's COVID or for Black Lives Matters, it's about creating new stories going forward that are, one, acknowledging pain and creating really powerful new stories going forward. I think, you know, it's, I mean, I'm a great fan of Joseph Campbell, and he talks about the monomyths and the hero's journey, but I've been also working with coaches around the heroine's journey, and the heroine's journey is very much about going into the unconscious and the subconscious mind, which I know that you, when we start working with that, it can be, the journey can be a lot quicker.
I mean, one of the most powerful things I think that we can do is to create forgiveness for things that have happened, or people that have done something. They may not even be aware that they've done something. But so for example, most of us have some sort of feelings of negativity towards one or other parent. But as parents, we can never be good enough. We can never give our children as much love as they really want or maybe need. And so being able to kind of meet up with your parent within your subconscious mind, even if they've passed away, and to basically tell them the ways in which you felt that they fell short. And you might do that in a really angry way, or you might do it in an understanding way, but to ultimately come to the point where you're able to feel some kind of forgiveness, some understanding first as to why was it that they behaved in this way. Usually it's because their parent behaved to them in a similar way, or in a way that meant that they didn't get as much love as they needed. So to be able to talk through just in your imagination, to create this forgiveness with your father, forgiveness with your mum, and also to share the gratitude for the things that they've done right, even if that's purely that they gave birth to you, that might be the only thing that you feel that they've done right. Say if a mum was very seriously unable to care for the child, gave the child up before the child met them, or whatever the reason is. So forgiveness is not, sometimes people say, oh, I'm never going to forgive them because they've done this, or this person doesn't deserve my forgiveness. And what people don't realize is, if you hold on to the anger, it doesn't hurt the person that you're angry with at all, really, unless you go and hit them, or destroy slash their tires or something like that. It's not going to hurt them, but it's going to eat away at your very being. And in terms of physiological health, there's a lot of evidence that feeling anger and that sort of pure rage even is very detrimental to our physical as well as our mental well-being, and it can affect our immune system very negatively. So it's, even if you think, oh, I don't really want to forgive them, if you make the effort and you manage to do that, even forgiving the situation is hugely empowering. And I found that myself, forgiving. I mean, I had pretty nice parents, but there definitely were some areas where physical abuse was the norm when I was growing up. So having to forgive my parents, or my father actually, for hitting me, what I thought was quite a lot, that was a massive thing for me. It really made me grow up and feel like an equal with him, rather than feeling intimidated, even though he's passed away. So I think getting to that level of forgiveness it allows you to love the other person that you felt angry with, and that's very healing for yourself. So it's I mean, I can't emphasize enough, forgiveness and then feeling gratitude is hugely beneficial. We all know this. This is quite common knowledge now, but it's got a huge effect on physical health too. Sorry.
There's a lot of research on both of those things, and I love the work that Desmond Tutu has done on forgiveness, and I'm a massive fan of processes that he can work not just on a personal therapeutic level, but also culturally and in wide. So there's a lot of work to do. I think it's hard and it's complicated, isn't it? I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, to give. But what Psychologies is all about, is about hope, and that there is a way. You may not know what that way is, but by featuring therapists and counselors and coaches and methodologies, that if therapy is not for you, there maybe look at the storytelling cafe, or look at sea swimming, or there is always a way forward, no matter how dark it's been in your past, but however much you suffered.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I was just going to say, meditation for me is one of the most powerful ways of coming back to forgiveness. So centering myself and using mindfulness meditation, and also the Metta Bhavana, the loving kindness meditation, is incredibly helpful. So you were saying that it can take a very long time to get to this point, but sometimes, that's a story in itself. So if we have this idea that, it's going to take a very long time, we've got to suffer a lot. Sometimes, strangely, sometimes a massive transformation can happen just like that in a second, where you suddenly have an insight that actually that person who I've been feeling negatively towards for the last 30 years is actually a victim of their own situation, and I can understand them, and I can feel compassion for them, and I can actually love them. And that can happen in a very short space of time. And when you feel that love in a meditation or in a visualization, it's incredibly healing for yourself. And it could be that you go on to heal a relationship, say with a sibling or a parent or a child even, that really hasn't been addressed for decades sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to tell ourselves it's going to be difficult and it's going to take a long, long time, because sometimes it really doesn't.
Okay, well, I'm really pleased that you're challenging me. That has been my story, and that's the story I have told myself. So I love the idea that maybe there's a new way or a different way. I will definitely check out the meditation.
It's been my experience. It's taken a very long time. I'm still on a journey. I don't want to give you the impression that I've sorted myself out like that. No, I'm just saying that there are some things. Sometimes there can be a slow rise and a really slow progression with trying to understand something and handle it and accept the shadow parts of yourself, for example. But sometimes there can be an amazing transformative moment, and it can feel quite magical. And I've had a few of those in my life, but it still doesn't stop me from definitely experiencing pain and having things come back to haunt me that I thought I'd addressed. So I don't want to give the wrong impression there that there's no quick fix for the issues of life.
Sure. I think I understand you, but it's good to kind of challenge the story that I think the main point here is healing is possible, and it's seek help, seek support, find a path that feels authentic for you, and you can dip your toe in with the World Storytelling Cafe, which I know that you've co-founded. There's some free meditations that you can try. So there's always a way. There's always a way to start on this journey. And my belief is the more we can heal ourselves, the more we can heal the world. So I think for me, it's always about starting with the inner work and going there. But thank you so much for your time today. That was absolutely fantastic. Great to hear and find out all the things about creating your own story, listening to stories at the Storytelling Cafe below. Lucie, thanks so much for your time today.
No, thank you. It's been really nice talking to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.